Frank Burdick was a building contractor in Foster City, California, and he lived with his family, with his wife and two little girls, um, just south of San Francisco. And he was a complete skeptic. He didn't pray, nothing like that. Anyway, he one day he was 4 stories up. He was, like I said, he was a building contractor. They were trying to finish this big building, and he was 4 stories up, leaned over to nail a truss down into place, and they were putting with a crane. They were putting the huge prefab roof on top of the building. They were trying to, and the roof slipped off the crane suddenly without warning, came down and hit right across the small of his back, just struck Frank, and knocked him, fortunately not all the way to the ground, but knocked him onto the unfinished floor of the 4th story. And it was incredible pain. I mean, you can imagine just the muscles, the ligaments in his back, the tendons, all of that. He instantly had major spinal trouble, especially when the muscles and everything started trying to grow back. It put pressure, lots of pressure on his nerves. And it got so bad, like I told you, he had two little girls, and the pain got so tremendous. And he was a rough, tough, contractor, like construction guy. He couldn't even put his girls on his knee. He couldn't even pick them up. That's how tremendous the pain was. It got so bad that he would fall down and could not even lift himself, even with his arms back up off the ground. A neighbor would have to run from across the street and help him back up again. Such was his pain that every 4 hours he was taking more codeine. The hospitalizations became more and more and more frequent. The months turned into years. Just agonizing pain. His wife, Fran, said that he would cry out in pain all night long, get up and pace and walk around. Can you imagine? And even in all of that, he would not pray. He thought people were nuts when they did that. He scoffed at them. Anyway, here's what happened though. The doctor said, if we do surgery on you, there's an 80% chance you'll be permanently paralyzed for the rest of your life. He was 23 years old, in his 20s, the prime of life, the young family. And so he tried not to do that right away with the surgery, but he was a semi-invalid. He got addicted to the pain medication. He didn't even care anymore. He literally said he felt like he was at the end of his life. He just was so addicted to the pain pills because he had to. He didn't see any other choice, any other way out. And then, this is the cool part of the story. A neighbor gave his wife the book, I Believe in Miracles by Catherine Coleman. And she read it. She began to pray. She wasn't extremely religious earlier on in her life either, for the most part, but she began to pray. And the little girls, his children, began to pray. And people began to bombard him, Mr. Burdick, with prayer, even though he wouldn't pray himself. And finally, his wife convinced him, hey, come with me to a meeting, to a church meeting. Come with me to see Catherine Coleman, a service. So he did. Listen to what happened. Listen to the power and the love of God to a complete skeptic, a man who was at the end of his life, from what he said. He was in the balcony, way up. She didn't know who he was. She had not the faintest clue, but she stopped partway through the service and pointed up at the balcony and said, there is somebody up there right now. God is healing them of a serious spine injury. Healing them. Can you imagine? He sank down in his seat. He didn't want the attention. He didn't know what was going on. But finally, he was convinced by others to try to get up. And to his astonishment, God's presence touched him. Catherine Coleman was right. In that moment, the Holy Spirit, Jesus healed him. He was able, he said, to stand up without any pain, without the help of his arms even. He stood up. The pain was completely gone. He was astonished. He did everything you can imagine. He twisted, he turned, he ran, he went up and down steps, which he had an unbelievably hard time with before. In fact, he would fall down often, like I mentioned, but nothing, no pain. Here's what he said. I want to read this to you, part of the story. He said, it was as though I had never been hurt. No pain, no soreness, not even any stiffness. For the first time in 3 years, he was able to pick up his little girls. Can you imagine that? And you say, well, did it come back though? It did not come back. he eventually went back to work. It says in part of the story here, it says 2 days later, after that church service, all the calcium deposits had disappeared from his backbone. The swelling and knots were completely gone. And I just want to end by kind of saying this. This guy said that not only did he go back to his construction job, but he said his back felt like iron, like he'd been the strongest he ever was in his entire life before. It's as if no injury had ever occurred to him. And it was 3 years of the most excruciating pain you can imagine. Such is the love and power of God and the healing of God. And he can do the same for you. He can do the same for anyone. God can do it again. He still does miracles. And I just want to end with this. This is what the man who was healed said himself. "Oh, I love God with all my heart, and I never pass up an opportunity to tell the men on my crew or my customers what God has done for me."